All right, everybody, welcome to Q&A number 4. So got a lot of really interesting questions I want to address today. Before I jump into that, I just wanted to kind of make a comment about something that I think is important. So as I've been doing this YouTube thing for the last year and a half, I think, it's been really cool to see a group of kind of like regulars start to kind of emerge. Like in the comment section, I love seeing kind of the regular faces, and I'm kind of getting used to seeing those regular faces, even though they're not faces, they're just like icons. But I just got to say, I really appreciate you guys. I really appreciate your support, and those of you that are making the effort that just really enjoy kind of interacting regularly in the comment section. I always really enjoy taking the time to kind of engage and listen to your interesting questions. I have something that's kind of a little bit of a thank you for you, and also a little bit of a promotional thing for my upcoming book, Green Monk, Blood of the Martyrs, which will be coming out this September. So some of you may know that Blood of the Martyrs was preceded by this book, which is Green Monk, the self-titled, or you can call it the Green Monk mini comic. I thought it'd be fun leading up to the release of the Green Monk book this fall to do some giveaways. So I'm going to give away this book today for someone in the comment section, but the 2 rules are that A, you have to have commented in the comment section before, and B, you have to leave a comment that's actually a comment that's saying something interesting. It can't just be comment. So those are the 2 rules. I really want to do it that way to kind of give a thank you to those that have kind of become the regulars in the comments section. I'll be doing some more giveaways kind of as we lead up to the release of the book. But so yeah, if you want this, you can see if you can win it in the comments section. The other thing to mention too is if you'd like a book and you just kind of want to pick one up, you can actually buy them on my store, on my website. So I'll leave a link in the description if you just want to buy one straight up. So with that out of the way, I want to jump into some of these questions. I want to address some concerns and some issues as well. So a couple weeks ago, I did my video that was about kind of poverty, talks about poverty and integrity, and it was kind of one of the more controversial videos. I can always tell when I'm kind of hitting the right note on a video, when I lose like a lot of subscribers and I get a lot of thumbs down. Like I want my videos to be provocative to a certain extent. That's always a good sign when a certain amount of people are a little upset by it. I know that I'm at the right place where I'm pushing things enough. But I also notice that those are the ones where I get the most positive feedback as well. So I think that's a good sign. But anyway, there's one term that I used in this video, and I'm trying to remember what the name of the title of the video was. Oh yeah, why you'll never be famous. And I talk about poverty, and there's a little bit of misunderstanding because I recommend that people should choose poverty. And I'm using poverty in a very particular way that's different than most people understand it. Most people understand poverty as like a state. It's like a descriptive thing that you are poor. It means you don't have stuff, and you don't have enough to eat, or you don't have enough for the basic necessities of life. And what I was using poverty in the sense of poverty as a choice. And I think the best way to describe it, and what I kind of used as my source for this idea of poverty, is the idea of, a monk. I've got a little bit of an obsession with monks, obviously. A monk that joins a monastery takes a vow of poverty. So for example, you could have a monk that comes from a very wealthy, noble family, and the family has lots of money. This monk could literally be wealthy, but this monk goes to a monastery and they take a vow of poverty. And that vow of poverty means they're giving up worldly possessions. They are not going to own stuff anymore. They aren't going to have any wealth, even though their needs may be very well taken care of. And if they were ever in a pinch, they could always go back to mom and dad at the manor and have the money they need. So that's the idea of poverty. I'm trying to communicate this choice to consume less, to be less materialistic. Some other examples of this type of poverty I've mentioned, Mr. Money Mustache, where he lives apparently on $30,000 a year. It's a choice to live on less, but he's got literally millions of dollars in the bank. Another example, someone like Warren Buffett, who is a billionaire but chooses to live a simple life. So poverty isn't about a state of not having enough. Poverty is about making a choice to consume less and be less materialistic. So hopefully that helps clarify that idea. All right, so another one. This is from Nilla V. I feel like a beginner artist after 15 years. How do you suggest interacting with pro artists you admire when you don't have any around in real life, complimenting them on Instagram and asking for advice? So this is very tough. Honestly, I have gone this route trying to do this thing before where I follow artists that I like and I've tried to compliment them and engage with them. And sometimes it just doesn't pay dividends. And it's not necessarily not worth doing, but it's not worth wasting your time if you are not getting a return on your investment for doing that. So it used to be, maybe 15, 20 years ago, you had these art forums you could go to. And there were places where these professional artists all kind of hung out and they shared their work and they gave each other advice. And it used to be that you could be kind of a little stowaway. Me as like a newbie artist, I could sneak into one of these places and listen to their conversations, and I could post my work and get some response to my work, and it was a really fantastic resource. And that's kind of disappeared. Kind of Twitter and Facebook and Tumblr have taken the place of these forums, and so you don't have this chance to kind of stow away like you used to. So it's hard to say if this kind of following people is going to pay dividends. I think it's worth it a little bit, but I would just try to engage with a lot of people and then try to focus on those that you find value in, that you find a worthwhile response to you. I would also say that for myself, I got the best return on my investment once I really started making work that other people respected. It's much easier for you to open the conversation with artists that you admire if you are already creating art that's worthy of a little bit of respect. And that wasn't that I was at the top of my game. I just was creating stuff that was good enough that it signaled that I wasn't full of shit, that I was actually trying and I was doing some legitimate stuff. If you can do that, if you can share your work and you can get people to notice it and to respect it, that's going to do so much more than trying to like butter up some artist. If you can actually build kind of a peer relationship and a sense of respect with another artist, you're going to be able to get a little bit more of this reciprocal relationship with them where you could help them out and they might help you out. That being said, I go back to the thing that I believe firmly in: finding people you can interact with person to person. I know that's going to be a challenge for some people, but that is worth really doing your due diligence in to try to build relationships with local artists. I guarantee you, every place in this wide country, every place in the world, you are going to find a good artist someplace. If you can chase down those people, if you can build those relationships, like I've recommended before, if you can move to those places where you can develop those relationships more easily, that's going to be so much to your benefit. I can't even describe how much more beneficial it is to be working side by side with a great artist and to have more of those casual, detailed conversations about your work, and to be able to ask a bunch of questions and to have them see what you're working on. It's just totally invaluable. So I recommend doing that due diligence, and I know that's going to be hard for some people. But anyway, that's kind of my thought on trying to get that feedback from better artists. All right, this is another really interesting question. This is from Saint Magnus. He says, "Hello, Brandon. Could you make a video on what to do when art hurts you? There's a new show coming to Cartoon Network called Thundercats Roar. Seeing it has made me physically ill, and I don't know what to do. Any advice would be much appreciated." So there's a bunch of people kind of busting this commenter's balls after he made the comment, just saying like, get over it, big deal, it's not going to hurt you. And to an extent, that's kind of right. At the end of the day, you kind of just need to like suck it up and get over it. I totally know where you're coming from. I mean, I was a child of the 80s. I love Transformers. That was such an important thing to me. And, Michael Bay's Transformer has just been so many daggers to the heart, and to a point that I'm just like kind of numb to it, and I just kind of like accept the pain and suffering that I feel when I see those films. So I understand where you're coming from, but this kind of gets to a much deeper issue that would be another interesting video. But just this idea that art is never just the piece of art. Art is always, it's about what we share. And it's what our shared understanding of that art is and how that art ties us together. So it's really natural to be there, for there to be a lot of conflict and tension in communities about what art should be, how it should be represented. And it's not a trivial issue. Like us negotiating what Thundercats should mean, what it should represent, is not a trivial issue. There's a lot of people that care about that. I mean, just look at, I saw this comic the other day where someone was like, oh, I'm interested in this art. I wonder what the fandom's like for it. And they open a door and it just shows this like Lord of the Flies style chaos of all these people fighting. And that's just kind of like what the expectation is for a fandom nowadays. Is just there's going to be all this hostility and all this tension about what it means and who it represents and who gets to own this piece of art. I mean, this is a question as old as civilization itself. I mean, you want to go back to like the Nicene Council. That was basically just like fandom, like Bible fandom, a bunch of Bible fans getting together and fighting over what the Bible means and who it represents and who gets to be the expert on it. So I think it's a super interesting issue. I think this kind of demonstrates how important art is to us. So thanks for asking that question, getting me to think about it. For advice at the end of the day, I mean, fight for what you believe. If you don't like it, be vocal about it, come up with good reasons. But I think the most empowering way to react to art that you don't like is to make art that you do like. So, if this Thundercats show bothers you, then you make the Thundercats that you think it should be. And that doesn't mean that necessarily you are going out and making Thundercats. It's just that you make a piece of art that contains those things that you wish you could see in that show. So that's the most empowering thing to do. In a lot of ways, I think that's kind of what motivated my first Green Monk book, was watching the prequels to Star Wars and being disappointed with them and wanting to make something that I felt represented the type of storytelling I wanted to see in those films. So anyway, that's a thought. Make your own art. I think that's the best way to respond to art that hurts you. Okay, here. FlyFly asks, here are some dumb questions. There's no such thing as dumb questions. Maybe there are. I don't know. How do you find about your artist inspirations? Like, I genuinely am not sure how to conduct such a search. Also, how do I find specific people responsible for this stuff when it's a big project and they are not specific, obvious names? Okay, you need to learn how to do a little bit of research and a little bit of detective work. If you are looking at a show, a cartoon series, a movie, there are always going to be a credit scene, and you can look up, you find the names of people. You need it. Sometimes this takes some real detective work. You find, okay, who was responsible for art direction, who was responsible for animation, who was the writer. You have to look up those names. Maybe you're gonna have to look up those names with the title of the project, so you're making sure that you're getting the same person. Wikipedia is a good place to start. You likely, if it's higher profile, you're gonna find some blog posts, some articles that are gonna give you a good start. I mean, good old-fashioned books are always a great resource. If you can find some actual books about artists that you admire, I guarantee you're going to find some information there about who their influences are. So you got to do some detective work. You gotta use Google. You got to use the library. You got to read some books to kind of track down some of those ideas. But with a little bit of work, it's not that hard to start finding people's influences. Like, you want to know who Mike Mignola's influences are. Look up Mike Mignola's influences, or look up Mike Mignola interview. And it's what are your influences is the most common question in art. And so it shouldn't be too hard to find some answers to that question. All right. This one is from Lies in Red. I've been struggling with consistency lately. Usually that happens when I'm shifting from one style to another. My question is, do you think it is wise to bend your own style to suit a client's needs? So I'm guessing the question here is really referring to consistency in style. Let me finish the question. My question is, do you think it's wise to bend your own style to suit a client's needs, or to stick to your guns and draw how you naturally draw? I ask this because I've been asked to do a lot of portraits lately, something I'm not great at. On one hand, I'll be learning a new skill. On the other hand, I feel someone truly liked my work. They would want something in that style. Okay, so I would go back and rewatch my video on, what is style, or style and voice. I can't remember what I called it. I think it's what is your style, or what is style and does it really matter? Especially if you are in an earlier phase of your career, just don't focus on style. Early in I spent 10 years kind of as a generalist artist doing just whatever came my way. And that was kind of my way of learning the things that I wanted to do, learning my strengths and weaknesses, and kind of developing my voice. So from this question, it sounds like you are earlier in your progression, and I would really think about taking the opportunity to take on some challenges and do some things that you haven't done yet. Portraits are one of the best things you can do as an artist. There's a lot of really interesting psychological reasons why that is, but portraiture, the discipline of portraiture, is a fantastic discipline and challenge to take on as an artist. You will grow a lot by doing that. And so I think a lot of times what happens, especially early on in your career, is you have things that you're comfortable drawing. And so you say like, oh, this is my style. The things I'm comfortable drawing are my style. But you need to be able to start teasing apart what is your style and what are things that you're afraid of drawing. What are challenges you are trying to avoid that are preventing you from growing? So it may not be a question really of style, but a question of you wanting to feel safe doing a certain thing. And you may find a lot of growth by doing these other things and trying some different things and doing some client work. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing client work. There's nothing wrong with an honest day's labor and doing your best work and being proud of your work and being paid for it. And you will grow, and I think you'll actually find your voice and you'll find your style by being willing to do some client work and going out of your way. And as far as this issue of consistency is concerned, stylistic consistency, like don't worry about that. Just expand yourself, try new things. You may not even really know the style and the voice that you really want. You may need to explore that a little bit more before you really find it. So yeah, don't worry too much about consistency. Don't worry too much about like doing just the stuff that you want to do or finding people that just want to hire you to do the stuff you want to do. Take the work, get the experience of doing the work. I think that's a fantastic experience to have. And your style will kind of grow and emerge in that process. All right, this one is from Teresa del Pilar. How do you deal with the economic instability of freelancing? Have you got any tips for a new freelance artist? So something I have to kind of reiterate is that I've never spent a lot of time being a freelance artist. I do a little bit of freelance work here and there, but I've never really had to sustain my finances entirely off of being a freelance artist. And from what I understand from those I've talked to, just being a freelance artist is tough. It's up and down. The instability is part of freelancing. There's no way of avoiding it. But that's not necessarily a bug. In some ways, that's a feature. The best way to understand that, I would recommend reading Nassim Taleb's Anti-Fragile. He has a very great description of why artisans and people that have irregular work, why that can be really beneficial. So I don't want to go into a lengthy description of why that is, but suffice it to say that, it's kind of better to learn to think on your toes, to be able to deal with ups and downs, and then to be ready for a big payoff as a freelance artist, versus working at a studio for years and years where you become super, super specialized. And then all of a sudden one day you get laid off, the studio closes down, and you're so specialized you can't find work anywhere else, and you have to like move across country to get another job, or you just never get a job again. I know so many people that that's happened to in real life, where they've worked at a stable job for years and years, and then they get laid off and they can't find work. At least being a freelance artist, with all of its instability, it keeps you nimble. It keeps you kind of prepared for the lean times, and it teaches you kind of to take advantage of the times of planning a little bit better. So it may not necessarily be a bad thing. Maybe read some Nassim Taleb, and that might give you an additional perspective on it. Okay, this one's from Brady. No answer to my question about where the cool hat came from. Also, where did the hat go? Are you ashamed of the hat? Did you lose the hat? Was wearing the hat in only one video part of some bet that you lost? Please address all of my questions about the hat in your next video. So the hat for me represented something. It was this symbol of this deep, dark shame that, when I really think about it, is seated in my friendship with Brady. So it's this kind of cankerous stain on my soul. And so I just couldn't live with that symbol of shame on my head anymore, and I had to burn it and bury the ashes in some mud. So anyway, that's my answer to that question. All right, next one. I'm sorry I don't have the name of the commenter here. It says, you and other artists I watch on YouTube talk about the fact of being an artist and a father, but I haven't heard about women that are mothers and professional artists too. I guess there must be lots of them, but I'm curious if you have met some artist women, freelancers or not, that have children. Thank you. So actually, yes, I know plenty of women that are freelance artists that also have children. So it is something that you can do. So what you have to decide basically is you just have to decide if being a mother is something that you want, and you have to kind of accept that that is going to take time away from making art. It's just like being a father and the commitments of being a father, how that takes time away from you. I will say being a mother, especially for the first year or two of being a mother, is going to be much more time consuming than even the duties of a father. So, and obviously, like when you are carrying a baby inside your body, that's way more time consuming than anything a father does. So I think the time commitment is more for a mother, especially early on. But again, I am not obviously a mother. So if there are other freelance working artists that are mothers out there watching this, I would love to hear your feedback on this, your comments on this, how you juggle those things. So, all right, this is a super interesting one. Again, I apologize, I didn't get the commenter's name. My question would be, do you feel overwhelmed sometimes with the benefits of free information? How do you cope with it? Daily, I think there's so much to do, and I am not a father, not even someone's boyfriend. That means I have so much time. But there's so many books, so many podcasts and films to experience, even if we are talking about animation or drawing. First of all, that's an awesome place to be, that you could really focus a ton of time just on reading and consuming interesting things. Back when I was studying film at school, I had a night job, and I would just basically go to the library every day and get 4 or 5 movies, and I would just watch a bunch of movies every day, and then I would go to work at night. And that was just a pattern I went through for most of the summer. It was a fantastic way just to introduce myself to tons and tons of stories. But I think the most important thing to address here is that we're in this new era where we have this flood of information that's so much more than we've ever had in human civilization. And we have to adapt to it. We have to find a way to filter this stuff in a way that's useful. In a lot of ways, it's like the way that our human bodies, our minds, and the structures of our anatomy have had to adapt to the information that's in the world. So, for example, the human eye, the sensitivity to light, the light receptors in the eye are more dense in the center of the eye, in the center of our vision, and they get more diffuse as it goes to the edge of our vision. And the purpose of that is it's a filter. It's so that we're really only ever have to focus on a tiny area just right in front of our eyes, because if we had that same level of information across our whole vision, it would just be too much information to process. Our brain just would not have the energy to process all that information and figure out what to do with it. And there's lots of things all through our body, lots of systems, and especially in our mind that do this that are constantly doing this filtering, that are trying to leave out unimportant information. Just focus on the stuff that's necessary to the task at hand. And I think that's an important thing to remember, is that these filters within our anatomy and within our brain are really built to be functional. They're really built to serve some sort of very specific task at hand to help us kind of survive, or whatever the case may be. So we as society and as individuals need to develop similar filters. And for me, I've started experimenting with that and working with that. And what I find really helpful is to create a set of very specific rules that address how you consume media and information. And you're going to have to kind of put together a set of rules that works for you. I did make a video last fall called "What is Your Code?" that goes into kind of what are my general rules throughout the day for kind of general productivity and to make my day run well. But a lot of those rules did focus on kind of this filtering of information type of stuff. So let me tell you about some of the filters I have, and some of these are kind of new since I've done this "What is your code?" thing. But for example, I only read books that interest me, that make me curious. I don't read any books because I feel like I have to read them. I only read one book at a time. So when I go to the library, I make sure and only check out one book, which has been a mistake in the past. I limit my social media time. I have filters on my computer that keep me from being on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube more than only a certain amount of time every day. I don't have any streaming services, so I don't watch any Netflix or Hulu or any of that. Or rarely, I may find out, I'll only purchase those services if there's a specific show or movie I want to watch that I know I can watch through those services. I will watch the show and then I will cancel the services. And a lot of times, like, that's cheaper than other alternatives. Sometimes I will rent things over Google Play. So I really try to just limit the browsing and the surfing types of actions. I don't find that super useful for me. And the other thing is I limit the types of video games that I play. I make sure that I only play video games that are kind of very linear and have a specific ending. I find that multiplayer games, I get too competitive and too wrapped up in them, and I just get carried away. So those are how I limit my own that inundation of information. That's kind of how I keep it out. I try to avoid reading too much news, and I try to focus on local news and try to avoid too much national, international news. There's another great line from Nassim Taleb in Anti-Fragile, is he talks about how important news will find its way of getting to you. And I've totally found that to be the case. It's uncanny. Some of you may know that I've kind of followed Bitcoin for quite a while. And I used to kind of just obsessively every day watch, like, what's the latest news? What's the commentary? What are the price fluctuations? And the funny thing is, I did all this watching, but when there were really big price fluctuations, when there were really big movements, there was always someone that went out of their way to tell me, oh, hey, I know you are following this. Did you read about this? Did you hear about this? And it's like the important information I would have got without following it obsessively. So I think there's really, we can consume a lot less news. I think for sure we do not need to know what Donald Trump is doing day to day. So almost every time I turn on the radio, that's the discussion. It's like, for most of us, we don't need to know what's happening day to day. And for most of us, the news that's really important will find its way to us. So anyway, there's some thoughts. Hopefully that's kind of helpful as far as creating that filter. So it looks like that is all the questions for today. Some really fun questions. Of course, if you have some questions that you would like me to answer on the Q&A, you can leave them in the comments. You can send me an email, brandondayton@gmail.com. You can contact me over Twitter, over Facebook, lots of places, lots of ways to contact me and ask questions. I love hearing your questions. So yeah, let me know if there's a question that I can answer. So a lot more fun videos coming out in the next couple of weeks. I'm going to be talking a lot more about the history of Green Monk. I'm going to be talking about how you get a personal project off the ground. I'm going to try to be doing some more art tutorials. So stay tuned to this channel. Please like this video if you liked it. Please subscribe, and we'll talk to you again next time.